And good morning
Thank
to
you
you.
very much for inviting me.
Good morning. I hope you're well.
I'm doing great.
Mm.
I hope you're doing same.
I'm also doing well. First, let's
Okay.
start with what the finance minister said. He mentioned his current account, the CD, inflation. Inflation actually went up slightly, but he said they expect it to would decelerate. That is, they expect it to slow down moving forward. They are also talking about, I think, our current account balance, among others, that they say are improving, including GDP growth. Good news.
Well, finance minister will definitely be excited because almost everybody in Ghana has been on him. Most definitely, with the IMF program, there will be some marginal positive changes in some of these macroeconomic indicators. But it's so marginal. And if you look at the areas that he's emphasizing on, it hasn't demonstrated any long-term good prospect for economic growth. Because you look at the growth is still marginal. We are still doing less than 3%. And an economy growing at that level with all the indication that some of the changes are just short-term response to some of the IMF reliefs that have been granted. You look at the debt to GDP ratio, it's rather looking very bleak in the sense that the finance minister is creating space to go in and borrow 2 billion more. And he's the only finance minister I see going in to borrow more when the economy is choked by debt. And that is going to really jeopardize the economic future of our country. You also look at the real incomes, they've not gone up. I wanted him to, talk about because inflation, as it indicated, hasn't come down. So people will have to spend still higher on goods and services. And that can cause disincentive to economic growth. So although he's touting some of these figures, but I don't see them really reflecting in our daily lives. And you look at the LEAP program that he spoke about. It's a good idea to cause that kind of relief to help the poor. But what is the quantum? And how are we going to see that reflecting in changes in some of the macroeconomic figures that he has, indicated are witnessing changes? This is very much expected, but I don't think we are really ready to get out of the woods, because the one thing that he doesn't want to listen to, almost a lot of experts think that is the best way to go, reduce expenditure and begin to demonstrate some effective management and seriousness in cutting down expenditure, and also finding ways to increase revenue mobilization.
Okay, I'll come to the reduction in expenditure and effective management, but you're talking about real incomes and inflation. Are those for you the improvements you want to see to assure you that there's a turnaround happening?
Well, these are very important to the citizens of our country who are actually facing a lot of challenges. When you take the price of certain commodities like cement, when you have some marginal reduction in it, it doesn't affect rent because rent has already been paid in advance. So it's not going to affect the ordinary consumer. And some of these things are pretty important. If you look at same growth that has been reported is in the mining sector. And when there's growth in the mining sector, it doesn't directly affect the Ghanaian economy significantly because most of the mining investors in the mining sector are foreigners and they will repatriate their earnings. So we are looking, if you look at certain areas that the changes are occurring. But this real income is very important because once prices goes down, what it means is that the goods and services, the patronage may also go up by consumers. And the consumer aspect of the economy, once we witness growth, it means that those who are selling will also earn enough to help pay taxes, to help shore up our revenue mobilization effort. But if you look at the what has been reported, inflation hasn't gone down. Real income is rather deteriorating significantly because every day in other important areas, prices are still even going up. If you go into the market today, you're not going to see some of the things that he's talking about directly because cost of imports are still the same, and we mostly import those things into our country.
But can this also be, because if you're talking about that, and I was listening to the IMF team leader, and they were talking about the fact that our foreign reserve position has improved in fact, the cedi is much more stable. Are those indications that perhaps very soon we'll see those some improvements in areas of prices of goods and services, among others?
Well, that was very much expected because the 600 million that came in was supposed to shore up our reserves. Definitely is going to affect the cedi. But even if you look at the cedi, the rate is very marginal. The change has been so marginal. And my sense is that if nothing is done and then we keep relying on our reserve, we may deplete it, and then the cedi will go back to where it used to be in a few months ago. So the solution, if you look at the solutions that have been deployed so far, they don't give a lot of promise because for me, it's just a very short-term reflection of what has been done with IMF money coming in, but I can't see any significant management attempt to really cause stabilization of the economy. So this may not be the panacea to what we have been confronted with all along.
I want you to listen to what the minister says they'll be doing going forward. And I want to take your view on some of the areas they'll be focusing on as announced by the finance minister.
Reforms are envisaged under the PCPEC to revamp the cocoa sector and reduce and eliminate the annual losses of Cocoa Board and its indebtedness. The reforms in the cocoa sector include the implementation of a turnaround strategy to be approved by Cabinet by end June 2023. This is expected to address cocoa pricing issues, Cocoa Board oversight challenges, introduce cost rationalization measures, and a phase-out of quasi-fiscal spending. Ladies and gentlemen, other structural reforms to entrench fiscal discipline and bolster transparency include reforms to enhance revenue administration and tax policy, operationalization of the Human Resource Management Information System, enhancing spending controls and prevention of arrears buildup, and streamlining of earmark funds. In addition, government is transitioning from central government reporting to general government, and from cash to accrual reporting. Our commitment to these reforms is matched by our relentless pursuit of innovation and strengthened partnership. Backed by the renewed drive for reforms.
And I guess you listen to him as some of the things they intend to be doing going forward. What do you think?
Well, you see, the cocoa sector, I was expecting him to talk about Galamsey. What has caused our, the cocoa sector to suffer is Galamsey. One of them is Galamsey, because people are buying the cocoa farms and then converting them into Galamsey pits. And that has had a very significant effect on that. And cocoa sector is not an area that, if you take the measures that he just described, is going to translate into short-term changes. It's not going to reflect in growth. It's not going to, have direct effect on the farmers' earning, because you are talking of technology, you are talking of investment. Those are investments for, long-term expectation that it will really help to grow the sector. So if you look at the cocoa sector, all the measures that he is talking about is not going to help us in the short term. Yes, those things we should be doing. We don't need crisis in order to introduce innovation into how we produce. It must always be part of government strategy. And this is a private sector driven activity. So how would the private sector execute that immediately to cause certain things to happen, people to earn more from the cocoa sector, and also to help improve our export position? So it's not going to help us significantly in the short term, because all these are, project policies that are geared towards the future. And you look at the taxes. I wanted him to talk about reduction of taxes, but it looks as if without the tax increase, IMF program will be completely different. In the first place, the program wasn't well negotiated, because IMF normally would never advise a country to reduce taxes. And they're also talking about taking exemptions. And if you want to boost certain sectors that depend on imports as inputs, then you must do something about the exemption. You must rather introduce certain type of exemptions to help producers to reduce production costs, and that can translate into many things: increase earnings and also control inflation. But in this case, they basically streamlining revenue sources without finding a way to give some relief to producers, and then target producers who can, in the short term, cause some changes in the macroeconomic indicators in the country.
And on the matter of spending, because there's an indication, I know these are quite technical terms. Everybody knows cash, that they are moving from cash accounting to accrual accounting. What does that mean, first of all? And secondly, it looks like I'm hearing terminologies that I heard when Honorable Setekwe was in office. And he talked about the extent to which they have improved accounting processes when it comes to government expenditure. And it looks like he's saying that they are going to do the things that Honorable Setekwe said they did and left for them.
Well, it's just a way of reporting, because when you use the accrual method, it means that anytime a transaction occurs, even if cash has not moved, you still need to report it. So it's, for me, is not anything that is going to really cause solution, but it's just a matter of how things are presented. That doesn't need to even be news to us, because they must be doing all those things internally to ensure that our economy is managed well. When you look at Ghana's economy, it has witnessed very marginal innovation. And sometimes the innovations are more textbook innovations, because they're not looking for traditional ways of managing the economy. If you look at, for example, the energy sector, we are doing nothing about conservation. And now government owe a lot of the power producers, and it's going to affect that sector. The government attitude is going to affect that sector, which employ a lot of people. And whenever sectors, important sectors like that, and then huge capital requirement, investment areas, it affects the economy significantly, because we are not paying the power producers. We are trying to restructure some of the debts that we owed, and that can affect the energy sector. And when the energy sector is affected, it directly translates into high production costs. That can also be one of the messes of our economy. So I look at the future, and I'm so worried that the finance minister is rather touting things they should be doing and not be doing to solve crisis. They are very, very conventional, not unconventional, to get us out of the wood.
So I don't know whether to call them the big things you expect them to do. You don't hear it.
Certainly, like energy conservation, huge investment in agriculture, because agri is the cardinal word. If we could do that, the 600 million that we received, if we had invested that in agriculture, within a couple of months, you can see that in the market. It will reflect in food prices and certain type of services. And that could have helped our economy begin to pick up in a real way. But the artificial solutions we are preferring now will only have short-term effect, and the long-term will still be, something we will have to deal with. So I think whilst we mismanage the economy, we are still mismanaging the IMF program, because we are looking at the wrong side of the equation. I also heard him talk about the increase in LEAP. And like I said, it's a way of stimulating the economy. It's a good idea that you give money to the poor so that they can spend to stimulate the economy. But you look at it, it's very marginal. In the US, they use the same model. When the economic crisis started, they gave citizens money. And the idea was that when they give them, they will go into the market and patronize goods and services that can help to, increase production. Because once producers are able to sell, they produce more. And that can create employment, reduce unemployment, and then deal with, many of the economic challenges that we are facing. But I don't see that happening. That is the problem. We should target agriculture, which we can easily control, and that will reduce imports. That will help our currency, because once we reduce importing, our currency position is going to improve. And that can translate into other figures like the inflation and also balance of payment.
So not so much optimism listening to him about whether or not our circumstances will improve.
All along is running a third world economy is a management issue. I continue to emphasize, because the IMF would have been a great opportunity for us to take certain measures as the inflows comes in. We need to begin to look at areas that we should pay attention to. And when you deal with sectors like food production, you can see the direct effect. We all know that when you conserve energy, which takes a lot of our resources and also impacts production directly, it can affect the economy significantly. And certain type of expenditures we need to eliminate, and then find ways to make tax affordable. All this, have been ignored. And then we are rather looking at areas that will not have direct effect on the economy immediately, like the cocoa sector. Cocoa sector, for me, is when you invest in it, is a long-term, returns you expect, not immediately. So my optimism would have been heightened if the finance minister had taken certain short-term measures that we can all see that the government is serious in getting some of the negative economic indicators reversed.
Thank you, Doc, for speaking to us. Just that I was surprised when you said the IMF arrangement was poorly negotiated. I felt from listening to the president's constant begging of everybody who turns up at the Jubilee House that they were not actually negotiating, we were begging for the arrangement. So I was a little surprised that he even used negotiation in the first place.
Well, you see him, the finance minister, bragging about the timely approval. It's just that you got an E. Someone gets an A also. And they say, oh, my A came first before the person. It doesn't matter. It's all the same. And when you are in the situations like this, most definitely, every country's situation is not the same. There are a lot of countries that are looking for IMF programs, but they have different sets of, issues. So the assumption is very erroneous that is, effective leadership that caused us to get IMF program. And what is so good about IMF program that we have to brag about?
Doc, thank you. Thank you very much for speaking to